Hey guys, Scott here. Now I want to talk with you about something that is everywhere right now. Every headline, every protest, every political debate, every comment section. This is the housing crisis. And the moment that gets mentioned, the first response is always the same. It's migration. There are too many migrants. That's why no one can buy a home. Now look, on the surface, that argument, it sounds logical. More people, same number of homes, prices go up. But here's what I want to do today. I want to break this whole migration debate down for you properly. I want to give you the right stats, the right data, and a very transparent, numbers-based view of this so that you can actually know the truth. The question is, to what extent is migration responsible for the housing crisis? Is it the only factor, or is it just one factor? And I'm going to show you a couple of charts and a really simple bit of math that, honestly, I haven't seen anyone talk about properly. You might agree with me, you might absolutely disagree with me, that's totally fine. But at least you'll know what the numbers actually say. So stick with me, I'm going to walk you through it step by step, and by the end of this video, you'll be able to make an informed call for yourself. Now, as always, this is your daily property update, your 5 to 7 minute update on the property market so that you can be a property insider. Make sure to hit subscribe so you never miss a video. So let's start with why migration became the scapegoat. Now, after Australia reopened after COVID, international students came back. Temporary workers returned, net overseas migration spiked. We had a lot of Aussies, expat Aussies, return to the country. And at the exact same time, if you look at the data, the rental market went absolutely feral. Vacancy rates collapsed. And if you follow SQM data, you can literally see it happening. All over the news, you had these stories of inspections turning into the rental Hunger Games. So naturally, people connected the dots, and I do get it. It makes sense emotionally, but what people don't understand is that correlation doesn't mean causation. When you actually look at the timeline, the story starts to fall apart. Because here's the thing most people do not realize. According to the Reserve Bank of Australia, the biggest jump in rents happened before the borders reopened. So think about that. If you look at rent growth, the pressure built right after 2020, even though borders didn't properly reopen until 2022. So why were rents already running hot if migration was basically shut down? And this is why this matters, because the RBA literally says rents surged 13.8% between 2021 and 2022 when international students were still largely locked out. Then when students did return, the RBA found they contributed at most 0.5 percentage points to rent growth, meaning the return of international students did not suddenly spike the rent growth rate. The trend was already moving. So if migration was the main cause, the timing does not line up. And that brings us to the data that most people ignore. Now let's go to the ABS population chart. Before COVID, net overseas migration was roughly 240 to 250,000 a year. That was the normal baseline. Then COVID hit, borders shut, and net overseas migration went negative. More people left Australia than entered. Now here's the key point. When borders reopened, migration didn't just restart, it had to catch up. Because those missing migrants from 2020 to 2022 didn't disappear forever. They weren't lost, they were delayed. So yes, migration surged in 2023 and 2024, but a big part of that surge was the system catching up after a once-in-a-century shutdown. Now here's what we know from the latest data. By the end of 2025, net overseas migration is back to around 300,000. That's only about 50,000 above pre-COVID levels. Now listen to this very carefully, because this is the simple math that almost nobody talks about. If COVID never happened and Australia had continued at the pre-COVID trend of around 250,000 net overseas migrants a year between 2020 and 2025, we would have welcomed about 1.2 million net overseas migrants. Remember that number? 1.2 million. Now, if you add up the actual figures, including the negative migration during COVID and the catch-up spike afterwards, the total comes out closer to 1.3 million. Now, do you see the difference there? It's not some insane blowout. It's not double, it's not 5 times. Yes, migration ran hot for a period, but the total difference over that whole window is nowhere near big enough to be the only explanation for a housing crisis this severe. And to take it one step further, the Australia Institute has done modelling that says Australia's population today is actually lower than what it would have been without COVID. That's what the chart is showing. The orange line is the pre-COVID trend. The blue line is where we actually are. And part of that is because natural increase also softened after COVID as well. So when people say migration is completely out of control, the full context is it spiked, it normalized, and the long run population line isn't as dramatic as people think, which brings us to the next part. Now, this is where the conversation usually falls apart. A lot of people say, fine, just cut migration and housing gets fixed. That sounds very simple, right? But economists have actually modeled this. KPMG ran the numbers and asked, what happens if Australia slashes migration for a decade? Here's what they found. The economy gets smaller, the workforce shrinks, the budget gets weaker, and housing prices can actually end up higher. Why? Because migrants don't just rent homes, they build homes. Construction workers, tradies, engineers, planners, and Australia already has a shortage of around 130,000 construction workers. So if you cut migration, what happens? Labor costs will rise, build times will blow out, fewer homes will get built. So yes, demand eases slightly, but supply collapses even faster. And when supply collapses faster than demand, you don't get cheaper housing, you get a tighter market and higher prices, which brings us to the real problem. This housing crisis didn't start 2 years ago. It's been building for decades. For years now, Australia has failed to build enough homes. For our population growth, smaller household sizes haven't been taken into consideration, more work from home, more aging demographics, and even before the migration surge, we were behind. Then COVID hit, construction slowed, costs exploded, builders went under, and what did policy do? Instead of fixing supply, governments juiced up the demand. First-time buyer schemes expanded. Shared equity schemes rolled out. More buyers, same number of homes. At the same time, planning systems stayed clogged. Councils blocked density. Infrastructure lagged massively behind. Approvals slowed down and completions fell. That's why vacancy rates are near record lows. That's why rents are surging. That's why prices keep pushing. Not because migrants exist or came into the country, but because we have failed as a nation to build enough homes. So here's the uncomfortable truth. Migration didn't create the housing crisis. It exposed it. It exposed a system which is broken. When a system is healthy, it absorbs growth. When it is broken, growth breaks it. Australia's housing system was already broken. Migration just revealed how fragile it really was. Blaming migrants feels emotionally satisfying because it gives people something simple to point at, but it doesn't fix anything. Supply does that. So that's how I see it, and that's what the numbers say. Migration matters, but it's not the villain. The real problem is structural supply failure and policy design. Remember, 1.2 million, 1.3 million, the difference is not that much. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think migration is the main cause of the housing crisis, or do you think the real issue is how few homes were actually built? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. And as always, this is your daily property update, your 5 to 7 minute breakdown of what's really happening in the Australian property market so that you can become a property insider. Make sure to hit subscribe so you never miss a video.